For those of you that are joining me for the first time, this live Q&A we do twice per month. And if you would like to submit your questions in advance, that typically bumps you to the top of the list. So the questions that I'm going to be answering today were typically submitted in advance. But if there are questions coming up here in the live space as I am going through these Q&A, please feel invited to type them there in the chat because I do take moments of rest to acknowledge those of you that are here in the live space. Okay, I think we're good to go now. Okay, so let me give you a formal welcome. Hello, everybody. This is our live Q&A event. Again, we host this twice per month on the first and third Thursday of every month. If you're joining me here for the first time, I am Brianna McWilliam. I'm a licensed and board certified creative arts therapist. I have more than 20 years in the field helping adults struggling with insecure attachment styles cultivate those loving and secure relationships that they want. And I do this through my registered trademark method, which focuses on soul-centered security. And that is a psycho-spiritual approach to healing attachment styles using somatic-informed art therapy techniques and attachment-informed communication. So the replay for these recordings, they exist inside our private student Facebook group as well as inside your student dashboard. And you'll find it when you log in under the live events and replays module. I'm going to be addressing questions again that were submitted in advance, but please feel free and invited to submit your comments, thoughts, reflections in the chat as we do this live. And I will take moments of rest to acknowledge them and try to address as many as I can here in the. If you submitted a question just before we started, I probably have not had a chance to take a look at it, but it will be top of the list the next time that we meet. Okay. Right. So if you are here in the live space, just drop your name there in the chat. I'd love to just give you a hello, just so that I know who is here, and give you a little bit of acknowledgments. You can see who's joining us here. Paula, nice to see you there. Welcome. Okay, so the questions we're going to be tackling here today. I've been in a long distance flirtation and I want it to grow, but I've been getting mixed signals. How can I find clarity or move on? If I'm becoming more secure, why am I still attracting anxious or avoidant partners? How do I navigate a relationship with a fearful avoidant partner who is committed but shuts down during conflict and never instigates a repair? They seem to love me, but they don't want a relationship. How can I let this go? What if your partner doesn't reciprocate how you're feeling as an avoidant? How long until the relationship starts to fall apart? Okay, great questions. Hi, we have Jessica, Constance, Joan, Leanne. Welcome. Nice to have you here. Thank you for joining. Okay, so the first one we're going to tackle, which is the theme that I chose for our event here today. I've been in a long distance flirtation and I want it to grow, but I've been getting mixed signals. How do I find clarity or move on? So this is a great question. And really it gets to the heart of what do you do when someone that you have been building a connection with suddenly goes quiet? You had weekly calls, there was an emotional connection, maybe even the spark of something romantic, and now perhaps there's silence, or there are sparse and polite replies at best. And maybe that leaves you feeling anxious, rejected, or even self-doubting, and really wondering if you should reach out and ask where you stand, or whether that would be too much and you should just walk away and let it go. So if you've ever been in that kind of gray zone, particularly in a long distance connection, and maybe even especially after a divorce or a long time away from dating, this particular segment is going to shine a light on the core issues so that you can find some peace, make a decision either way, and move forward from a place of deeper self-trust. Okay. So first thing I want to say about this is that it comes from a member of the online community, and they did provide a little more context and detail. So I want to provide some of that so we understand the full picture of this case illustration. So I've been in contact with someone for a year. We met at a retreat. We have mutual friends. We've only seen each other 3 times due to the long distance. We used to have regular weekly calls, and while we never spoke directly about how we felt, it seemed like something was building. There were tentative plans for him to visit me, but then he went on a trip and never mentioned it again since he got back. He did not disappear, but the communication is notably sparse, and I thought he would bring it up again when ready. I am newly back in the dating world after a long marriage and difficult divorce, and finally felt ready for something deeper. Should I send a message to find clarity or take the hint and let it go? So let me know in the chat if this relates to you or if you've ever had an experience like this, or maybe you know someone who's gone through something like that. I'd know if this resonates with you. And I just want to say thank you to our inquirer for their bravery and their vulnerability in asking that question and providing those details. So the parts that I think are the most important regarding this question are number one, they never directly discuss their feelings. So while your feelings are always real and valid for you, and your behavioral observations may be correct, the connection in many ways is still built on interpretations and assumptions of what it means to him. Secondly, there was a meaningful shift in communication after a trip that he had taken, and that wasn't directly addressed. And third, the inquirer seems to be in a phase of life where they are ready for a deeper emotional investment, which we know they are capable of because of their relationship history, but they've had a difficult heartbreak. And so now there's some uncertainty that is kind of stalling their growth, right? And I think it's important to point these things out because these are the moments where we either wind up reinforcing old patterns or we can choose to communicate from a place of self-advocacy and self-awareness. So, three important points I want to make about this. Number one, emotional safety comes from clarity and not from comfort. Number two, interpretations or assumptions are not the same thing as direct communication. And number three, you are allowed to outgrow a connection that maybe once felt safe and enticing, but it has changed over time, right? So I want to break these down a little bit more in depth. So first, clarity over comfort. When we've been out of the dating world, especially after something significant as a marriage and divorce, it is very natural to gravitate towards, let's call it a soft reentry, right? A connection that doesn't demand too much too soon can feel like a gentle reintroduction to the dating space. But once you start feeling yourself becoming emotionally involved, the clarity, asking for clarity might feel a little too confronting. But it's really the only way to get that kind of emotional security. Not knowing where you stand keeps your nervous system kind of in this low grade spinning, right? This low grade humming. And now you're trying to interpret mixed signals. You're trying to read between the lines, and you start crafting stories to explain what is inexplicable. And that's not really going to foster intimacy. It's going to build upon your anxiety, and it's going to be dressed up as some kind of hope. But the anxiety, we have to acknowledge, may be serving a protective function here. It's this confusion is creating kind of like a smokescreen so that you don't risk asking a clarifying question, because what if that clarity threatens the connection? So to cut through that smokescreen, we're going to have to embrace the second point, which is that interpretations are not the same thing as direct communication. So we need to stop interpreting and start communicating more courageously and directly. So in this case, the inquirer said things like, I felt like something was building, or I thought he'd reach out when he was ready. And, and I say this with so much tenderness because I was basically on my own for about 9 to 10 years after my divorce. Those are assumptions and interpretations, right? And assumptions and interpretations keep you stuck in limbo. Real connection isn't really built on decoding things. It's about being invited to and participating in a real ongoing dialogue. So, what if you gently reached out and said something like, I've really enjoyed our connection and felt that something was growing between us. Since returning from your trip, however, something has shifted in the energy. Is this still something you're interested in exploring? Because some clarity would really help me with my next steps, right? So you don't need to plead, you don't need to convince, and you want to communicate that you have emotional command of yourself. right? You just want to name what is real for you in your experience and just invite them to do the same in return. Now, they could respond in a way that is cagey, ambiguous, or seems like they're placating you because they're worried about hurting your feelings or something like that. In which case, they may have met somebody else, right? Because this is a long distance thing, or they just don't want to hurt your feelings. Either way, that response is still a lot of information, and it's information that you need and want, right? So they could also, that's one possibility. The other possibility is that they answer you directly. Maybe they say they were backing off because they didn't feel like they were getting clear signals from you either. And in my 20 years of clinical experience in relationship coaching, I can tell you I have seen both of those scenarios play out. One is waiting for the other to set the tone and to name something, while the other is waiting for them to set the tone and to name something. And because neither one of them is doing it, both wind up assuming neither one wants it. That happens too, right? And so that brings me to the last point for this question, which is that on a spirit level, maybe your readiness for more just outgrew the nature of that connection. So what once felt like a safe, slow burn possibility now starts to feel confusing and unfulfilling. And it's not necessarily because something went wrong, but because you just grew out of it. You became ready for something deeper. That gentle introduction awoken something within you. And now that thing that awoke has a little more bravery, has a little more confidence, has a deeper desire, a deeper, more defined want of something that includes emotional reciprocity. So maybe you're ready for someone to move towards you with a clear and confident kind of energy, not shies away from you with unspoken things and ambiguity. So instead of asking oneself, should I send a message? Try asking this question first or instead, is this connection still aligned with the kind of love I'm ready for now and next? Right? Actually, for those of you that are here, just drop a yes in the chat if that reframe rings some bells for you. Is this connection still aligned with the kind of love I'm ready for now and next? Give me a yes if that question resonates with you. So altogether, bringing this to a close, if you've been living in the gray space, you're hoping for signs, you're interpreting mixed messages or their silence, and maybe you're holding your breath, waiting for them to set the tone or to give you some clarity, then this is your invitation to exhale. So maybe you send the message asking for clarity if it brings you peace, not because you're hoping for another hint or breadcrumb. And even if they don't answer, or reply to you, remember that no answer is an answer. You still gave yourself the gift of truth telling, of honoring your growth, of not abandoning yourself in the name of not losing them, of standing in your sovereignty and honoring your feelings, right? Because what you're craving isn't just clarity, it's clarity on the way to connection with someone who meets you with the same depth that you are ready for. And that is not too much to ask, right? That's not too much to ask. Okay. We have some yeses. Thank you for sharing. I sought clarity and it all fell apart. I should have believed in my worth and got on with my life. Seeking caused him to feel pressured and attacked. It probably would have fizzled, but I wouldn't have gotten hurt or felt rejected. I don't know that I would say fizzling is any less painful. Um, but when someone responds, but I'm pressured, I'm attacked, that's good information, right? Yeah, it just wasn't what I wanted. Yeah, exactly. I went through this thing long distance and he pulled out when he felt this could go for real and then told me he only wanted friendship. But after that, in a meeting, he began to give me strong signals of romance and then pull again. Yeah, that's kind of a fearful avoidant pattern. We're going to talk more about fearful avoidance in just a second. Yeah, thank you for sharing your responses. Okay, so the next question we had. I'm becoming more secure, but I keep getting attracted to anxious or avoidant partners. Is this a sign that we should be doing the work together, or is it time for me to walk away? Okay. So, what do you do when you've been doing the work? You're no longer spiraling after every text message. You are honoring your needs. You do feel more grounded and more secure. And yet, you're still drawn to people who pull away or cling or seem emotionally unavailable in all the old familiar ways. It can kind of leave you wondering, am I not as healed as I thought I was? Is this a sign to lean in and grow with them together, or should I just say goodbye? So if you've ever felt like your inner healing is outpacing the connections that you're finding, in this little segment here, I want to help you stop second guessing your growth and make relationship choices from a place of discernment. Okay. So for this particular question, there are four major points I want to explore. The first is that security isn't about never getting triggered. It's about how we hold those triggers and ultimately respond. Secondly, life may be bringing you people who activate you, but it's not likely to punish you, but rather give you an opportunity to unearth and integrate something more, something deeper, because you're ready for it now, because of all the work you've been doing, right? Number three, whether to stay or go really depends on that person's willingness to grow with you. It's a 50-50 thing. Now, sometimes there is a layover before your soul tribe shows up. And that is my fourth point, is that sometimes there is a layover before your soul tribe shows up. So I want to break these things down one at a time. Now, the first thing, security is not perfection. It is compassionate integration, right? So a lot of people tend to think that being fully secure means that you'll never feel anxious, avoidant, or uncertain again. But real security is really not the absence of insecurity. It is the presence of compassion towards what is getting activated within you. It's that ability to expand around and hold whatever it is long enough to learn from it and process it in a healthy way. So if you are judging yourself for still feeling anxious or for still being drawn to someone avoidant, you want to take a pause because that judgment in and of itself is coming up to be acknowledged and healed. Of course, it's okay to be discouraged, right? Maybe you thought focusing on healing means that I should have peaceful connections now. And it absolutely can, right? It absolutely can. But if you hear an inner critic pipe up and say things like, we should be past this by now, or I thought I'd healed enough, but look at how insecure these people are. I must be doing something wrong. We want to take a step back and recognize the nature of that critical voice, that part of you that's judging other people, because usually, right, there's another finger pointing back right at ourselves, at our own inner self. So it is that critical voice that needs love. So it's not anxious and avoidant people that you're attracting. It's people that in some way probably mirror back to you that criticism. Something in them brings it up in you. So that's what you're intended to see, because attachment security is self-compassion in action. So if you can say to yourself, hey, I'm feeling anxious and critical of myself, that I should be somehow attracting different types of people. But you know what? It probably makes sense that I would feel that way based on what I've learned and what I know. But now, however, I know how to support myself better. And I'm going to show myself a little tenderness and patience while giving others the same grace and benefit of the doubt, right? So it's just a little shift in energy and staying present with that trigger instead of reacting from it, getting curious about the criticism instead of believing it. And that is a muscle that you are building over time, right? And that brings me to the second point, which is triggers are teachers, not necessarily tests, right? So our triggers can be teachers that point you in the direction of your deepest unmet needs. And if you keep meeting anxious or avoidant people, it doesn't mean that you've done something wrong. It might mean that you're being invited to notice a pattern of critical evaluation that's happening in your inner world. Okay. So if you find yourself kind of sizing people up quickly and assessing if they're safe enough or healed enough or worthy enough, that can be the mirror. It's just showing you the presence of your own inner critic and the critic that is standing on guard over an unmet emotional need. So it's not about blame, it's about awareness, right? So now we need to ask, what is that unmet need? And how can we approach it with compassion, empathy, playfulness, and acceptance? Because we got to find a way to express that quality that you carry, even with an imperfect partner, because that gives you permission now to find a way to integrate that, to embrace that for yourself. So you might ask, can I respond in this moment with empathy instead of judgment? Can I offer grace instead of expecting perfection? And so that is how the healing process stops being about some kind of performance or meeting some imaginary standard of security, and it starts becoming a living relationship with your own heart. And that leads me to the third point, which is that growth requires two participants, right? So the question asked, is it teamwork? Is it time for teamwork or is it time to sail away? So that depends on one thing, right? And I say growth depends on two participants. Sometimes it's you and someone else, and sometimes it's you and you, right? So let's say we're asking, is growth possible with someone else? So are they aware of their patterns? Are they willing to be self-reflective? Are they open to co-creating a safe container for your relationship? If so, there might be space to expand together. And that might look like they have a capacity to name their tendency to shut down and actively working to stay in dialogue, even when they're uncomfortable. Saying things like, I'm noticing my anxiety and I'm trying not to project it right now, instead of jumping to blaming or withdrawing. Maybe it is apologizing after a moment of defensiveness and then taking responsibility for their tone or their reactivity. Maybe it is being open to learning more about your needs and then actively asking how to support you with them, even if they don't always get it right. So this is what we talk about when we say in process, right? It's okay to be in process. It's not perfection, it's participation. But if you feel like you're constantly explaining, overfunctioning, trying to earn breadcrumbs of emotional presence, that doesn't really amount to a relationship. It's really driven by attachment anxiety and emotional survival. So you want to ask yourself, am I walking with someone or am I dragging my hope behind me? Right? Because you do deserve a partner who participates in that process, not someone who's going to make you do it all by yourself. And the last point I want to make here is that sometimes there is a layover before your new soul tribe arrives. So what do I mean by that? It's like the space in between. Sometimes there's a little bit of a layover, meaning there is some time that has to pass whereby the people that you were in your life who were a result of the person you have been up until this point, right? They were responding to let's call it an old version of you. It's not really old, it's a different version of you. And you've been working really hard to heal, which requires changing your identity on many levels. Your values, your priorities, how you think, how you respond. Those are all very important contributors to who you are and what you want, right? And that's as you start to heal, that starts to shift, it starts to change. And so the people who were a match to who you were up until this point, many of them are not going to be a match for you anymore. Some of them will be inspired by you and may come along for the ride, and those are wonderful friends to have. But some of them are just going to fall away from your path. And so you might be feeling more secure than ever and still feel lonely. Maybe you've stopped spiraling, you've stopped chasing, you're not abandoning yourself anymore, and suddenly it just feels like things are a little quiet. Maybe dates fizzle out because you're not taking on all of the initiating anymore, right? Maybe old friends don't know how to connect to you because you connected over misery and commiseration. You just talked a lot about how miserable you were, and that's what connected you. Maybe you feel like you're doing everything right, but people aren't connecting with you in the same way. So you're like, what did I just like heal myself out of intimacy? I would say you've healed yourself out of survival mode. You're not really confusing chaos with connection anymore. And so your nervous system just needs a little respite to become calibrated to something and to someone's that are willing to meet you on a deeper level now. I think of this as like a sacred in between. And a lot of times, unprocessed grief shows up at this time, right? Grieving the familiar chaos that you used to call chemistry, grieving the roles that you played where you knew what was expected of you, even if it hurt you, grieving the versions of you that coped by contorting yourself or controlling everything. You got to let that go. And that requires a grief process. And it doesn't mean that you're unrelatable. It just means that you're not relating to people in the same way. You've outgrown those patterns. And it's not the end of intimacy, but it is the beginning of a certain kind of resonance. People who are going to match your energy in their own way. So I think of this as kind of an initiation, right? This kind of catalytic moment in your life. So that's the 4 points I wanted to make here is that once again, number one, security isn't about never getting triggered, it's about how you hold and respond to those triggers. Number two, life can bring you people that might activate you, but it's not to punish you, it's likely to help you unearth and integrate something deeper. Number three, whether to stay or to go depends on their willingness to grow with you. And number four, sometimes there is a layover before your new soul tribe shows up. And so I would recommend using that time as an opportunity to process and grieve what needs to be grieved while you step into this kind of spiritual initiation that's arrived in your life. So bringing it back to the original question, I keep attracting anxious or avoidant partners. Is this a sign to do the work together or to walk away? So I like to offer a reframe for this question. Is this connection helping me to unearth and embrace more of who I am? Or is it asking me to abandon who I am to maintain a bond from a place of anxiety and fear? If it is the second, I recommend it might be time to lovingly let it go. Okay. And remember, you're not becoming secure so someone else will love you. That's a pattern that you're trying to break. Instead, you are relaxing into the secure version of yourself that already exists inside of you so you can stay rooted in love regardless of what anyone else says or does. Because what you're really craving isn't just connection, it is that resonance, it is reciprocity, and it is a form of shared courage, really. And that is not too much to ask for. That is your new standard. And when you start living from that truth, the more your relationships are going to show up and they are going to be a match for what you're vibing at, right? So just let me know in the comments if this is resonating with you. I would love to know how this is landing. And just some comments here. Regardless of fearful avoidance, do they struggle with physical intimacy, or is this just another manifestation of a lack of trust regarding? So fearful avoidance, it depends. Folks that have avoidant tendencies, they can sometimes compartmentalize physical intimacy and emotional intimacy because if they show up together, it can be overwhelming. So sometimes they wind up allocating their desires for physical intimacy to one person or one type of relationship, and then the emotional intimacy gets allocated to something in somewhere and to someone else, so that it doesn't become overwhelming. All their eggs aren't in one basket, that kind of thing. And it does stem from a lack of trust. It stems also from a lack of safety, right? Trust evolves from having felt safe. And if we don't trust, we didn't feel safe, right? So And that trust, it may not have anything to do with you. That's the thing. If they've already shown up having a certain level of intensity around their own insecurities, they just showed up that way in the relationship, it's internalized at that point. So there's a level of internal work they need to be doing to really be showing up in earnest to the work that's being done in co-creative container of a relationship, right? I recently started your program and still have work to do. I'm fearful avoidant with a lot of anxiety in my life. Since getting with my partner, I've gotten more triggered in villainizing my partner, which now I've become aware of them and linked them to my parental pain points. My partner is more secure and has worked on his traumas and is confident in what he wants out of this relationship, giving me grace and holding space to work through my stuff. But I fear I knee jerk into reactions, then realize, and much later, how bad they are. Fear that pause is not kicking in quick enough to catch myself from reacting, stay level-headed. This connection is a mirror to who I am. I do not want to lose him. I mean, then you're already halfway there, right? You already see the patterns. You're able to take stock. You're able to apologize and own what's yours. Just be careful not to take on too much because if you're like, if you have a story about I'm the damaged one and he's further along than me, be careful of a story like that, right? Because that is a recipe to take on more than is actually your due, and then you stop seeing him for what he is truly bringing to the table, good and bad, and he either becomes all bad or you either become all bad. That's the flip side of villainizing, right? Villainizing is splitting. So it's good and bad. If he's bad, then I must be good. If I'm bad, then he must be good, right? And so that's early stuff. That's like root and sacral chakra stuff. Um, and so I would just recommend being in therapy, being with someone, having another uh, buffer or voice that can help you can bounce those things off of because that will give you an opportunity to sort of process it a little bit and then be able to safely invite him into digesting what's coming up for you, right? Help someone to help you sift and sort through, okay, 70% of this is my parents and 30% of this actually belongs to him in this relationship or whatever it is, right? Thank you for your clarity. I'm glad you like that. I want to build deeper trust and safety to keep the connection. Yeah. Yeah. I would recommend getting some help with that. Should we address passive aggression in what cases? So it's hard to answer that unless you give me a specific example. I always, I always just address what's in front of me. I try not to ignore, dismiss, or anything. So if someone's being passive aggressive, I will just say, I won't necessarily say you're being passive aggressive, but I will acknowledge what they're doing and the reaction it is stimulating within me, right? So, you know, I asked you XYZ and you said ABC, but your body language, your tone of voice, and your behavior would indicate yada, yada, yada. So to me, there's a discrepancy there. Can we talk about that? So what's the feeling there for you? Right. So that's kind of addressing passive aggression, right? You just, and well, I don't know what you mean. I don't, okay. Well, until you're ready to talk about it openly, this is what I'm going to do, right? Now you set a boundary. You're not willing to talk to me about your passive aggression? Okay, so I'm not available unless you're willing to talk about it. So let me know when you are and set a boundary. I hope that helps. Okay, what do we got next? Ooh, we have thunder and lightning outside. It's pouring rain in New York City. Okay, well, this might connect. This might connect to what we've been asking in the chat. How do I navigate a relationship with a fearful avoidant partner who's committed but shuts down during a conflict and never initiates repair? Okay. So What do you do when the person you love says that they're all in? Maybe they even say, I want this to work. But when there's a conflict, they tend to pull away. And maybe there's no follow-up, no repair attempt, no closure, just silence, distance. And you wind up feeling like you're the only one who cares about the relationship. And maybe you feel like you're the only one holding it together. So if you have ever felt like you're in a relationship where the love is present, but the repair is missing, especially with someone who pulls away when it gets hard, then in this segment, I want to talk about how we can understand what's really going on beneath the shutdown. And also shine a light on the fearful avoidant attachment style, which is also called disorganized attachment, and why it can lead to those kind of patterns, right? So that we can respond with compassion and clarity and also protect our peace while staying true to our values, right? So before we really dive into that, I think it's important to define what is disorganized attachment and fearful avoidant attachment. So I would say this is probably one of the lesser understood attachment styles. It forms when someone grows up in an environment where love and fear were intertwined. There was a lot of predictable unpredictability. So in other words, the people they depended upon for safety may have also caused emotional harm or inconsistency. And so as adults, fearful avoidant or disorganized partners tend to crave intimacy, but they also fear the vulnerability that it requires. And so they want that connection, but if a moment feels too intense or a conflict arises, they can shut down or push you away. And it's not because they don't care, but it's because their nervous system associates that closeness with some level of hurt, pain, or rejection. So it can make conflictual situations particularly overwhelming. And sometimes it's not about the disagreement, it is activating old programming that says, if I mess this up, I'll be abandoned. If I get too close, I'll get hurt. Things always end, and I'm always the one wind up being hurt. Better get out now before things really go south or the other shoe drops, that kind of thing. And so that can create a sort of push-pull pattern that makes this attachment style confusing, painful to experience, and difficult to navigate sometimes in relationships. And it's important to acknowledge that dynamic because it is, I would say, one of the most common traps that we can fall into with anxious and avoidant pairings. If you have someone that's more disorganized, they can wind up polarizing their partners into an opposing attachment style. So let's say you have someone that is very anxious and they meet a fearful avoidant partner. The fearful avoidant can be either polarized towards being more avoidant because their partner's very anxious, or the fearful avoidant partner can become more anxious, which polarizes the anxious partner to become more avoidant. But they tend to be polarizing. Okay. And so taking that into account, a few points I want to make about reframing this dynamic are number one, and relevant to this question, that commitment doesn't necessarily mean capacity. Doesn't mean capacity can't grow, but just because you've committed doesn't mean you've worked on capacity. Secondly, this partner could want repair, but maybe they just don't know how. There is some skill building involved here, and maybe they just weren't modeled or taught the skills. And lastly, boundaries are going to be required, and that is to protect the love that is growing between you, not block it. Okay. So let's talk about the first one. Commitment doesn't necessarily mean capacity. Now, just because a fearful avoidant partner commits to a relationship doesn't mean that they have resolved their intimacy wounds. So commitment can be a beautiful sign of intention. They want to stay, and perhaps they want to do what it takes to stay. But it doesn't mean that they've suddenly overnight acquired all the emotional tools they may need to be grounded in a conflict that is turning on their instinctual survival system. So for a lot of fearful, avoidant, or disorganized folks, a disagreement, it doesn't just feel like a momentary disconnection. It can feel like an emotional trigger that means everything is falling down around them. And so their system kind of goes into this fight, flight, or freeze mode. And so when that happens, they shut down or they disappear, and it might feel like it's some kind of punishment. They may even say they're doing it to punish you, but the only reason they have that habit of punishing people is because that's how they learned how to protect their safety. But it is a mechanism that usually stems from shame or fear. Secondly, which kind of leads into the second part. Secondly, maybe they want to repair. Maybe they know this about themselves, but they don't know how to change it. They weren't taught what they needed to know in order to expand their capacity for moments like that. They do want to connect, but when the dust settles, they feel ashamed and now they're paralyzed. Or they're terrified that any attempt to bridge the gap is going to go poorly and they'll just make it worse. So maybe they don't reach out. Or maybe there's a silence that just gets bigger and bigger, louder and louder, wider and wider. And so that's why if we're in a relationship with someone that is more fearful avoidant, of course we would want and expect that they'd be doing their own work, but you have to realize that you may be initiating some of the repair, at least in the beginning, because you're going to be modeling what a secure repair would look like and how it could work. So that looks like gently naming what happened, expressing how you felt, and offering a bid for reconnection without blaming language, right? So I noticed things felt tense yesterday, and I really feel like I'd like for us to reconnect again. When you're ready, I'd love to talk about it because it matters to me that we resolve this. So you're not minimizing your experience, you're creating a space where connection can re-enter. But modeling is not martyring yourself, right? Modeling is not martyring yourself. And that brings me to the third point. You're still going to have boundaries, right? We can know why someone acts or behaves the way that they do, but it's not necessarily an excuse for the impact of their behavior on you. And so that means that you have to have good boundaries with them. Even if they don't like your boundaries, the thing is that when you have them and you enforce them, even if they don't like it in the moment, they're going to trust you more. Well, he's not going to change who he is and what he wants and what he does just because I don't like it. So that makes it safer for me to be around him because that means that I'm not fully responsible for everything that happens. And that's a load off, right? So it's okay to say things like, I understand you need space, but I also need to know when we're going to circle back within a day or two so that we both feel safe and seen, even if it is to agree that we need more space. So you agree to these touch points because a healthy relationship is going to honor both of your needs. But if you're always the one doing all the heavy lifting, emotionally speaking, that's more sacrificial, right? And that's a kind of love that is going to cost you your peace. So fearful avoidant partners, of course they can grow. Of course. Of course they can gain this capacity. But that's harder for them to do if their partners are keep inserting themselves to try to fix it for them. They have to learn how to hold that for themselves. And boundaries are going to let them do that. So this is how and why your boundaries are actually a gift to the relationship you're cultivating, right? Okay. So if you can connect to this or you feel like you've been caught in this kind of pattern, this is kind of like a gentle nudge, right? We don't have to choose between compassion or clarity. Clarity is going to let you be more compassionate than ever. We can hold space and set standards in relationships, and we can offer love and honor our limits within them. Because our goal is not to fix someone, it is to co-create a safe container. And that is going to require that both of you are willing to repair. It doesn't mean that you're both going to be 50-50 in terms of how you show up all the time. Sometimes it's a scale that balances itself over time. Sometimes this person needs you to initiate more with a little more compassion because they just haven't had the models for it. And over time, they're going to start gaining that capacity and learning and learning. And now when you are struggling, now they're going to show up And they'll be like, you know what? You've helped me so much. I'm going to help you and I'm going to carry a little more now this time, right? But overall it balances out, right? In the bigger picture it balances out. And so, and both of you deserve that. Because it lets you relax into love, not work so hard for it, not wrestle with your demons over it, right? So actually, I'd be interested. Let me know in the comments. Have you ever felt like the only one, like you were the only one doing the repair work in a relationship? Or do you feel like you struggle to reach out for repair in a relationship? And has anything helped you? What has helped you? Or what is still difficult about that? I'd love to know. Okay. I wish I was. What does it mean when she says she wants to be friends, but she also won't shut down the romantic relationship door because she doesn't want to regret her decision? She means she's ambivalent. It means she's unclear and undecided. And because of that, there's this FOMO that comes up, fear of missing out, right? Not wanting to cut off any potential options, right? But I want to be friends for now, but I want you to be an option down the line in case I change my mind because I'm not really clear on what I want, or I believe that my happiness extends from the stimulus of my environment. And what if I find something better? And I'm not saying that to make it sound kind of, mean girlish, but that kind of attitude stems from someone who doesn't believe that their happiness, their quality of life stems from an internal locus of control, right? Stems from the capacity to generate attraction and arousal and to choose it for yourself. No, no, it happens to me. And I have no control over when it shows up. So I just have to be available and ready for when and if it shows up, right? So that's kind of what it means. If you're sure of what you want, I don't know that I would give it, I don't know that I would. If she says she wants to be friends, then it's friends. And you got to be clear about how that role is defined. Okay, then there is no romantic door. And I'm sorry if you want to have it both ways, but that's not how it works. For me. For some people it is. If it is for you, then go ahead. But I would be very clear about what the expectations are in that friendship, right? With possibility of a romantic door, right? It's kind of like having your cake and eating it too. I was anxious, now I'm more secure, but I feel like I still act anxious in front of some people. Does that mean they're not safe and I shouldn't be with them? Um, I don't know if it means that they're not safe and you shouldn't be with them. I think it means that some part of you is picking up on something in them that, which means that there's an opportunity to pause and reflect. There's an opportunity to pause and ask yourself, is this my anxiety or is this their anxiety? And if it is their anxiety, what is it about their anxiety that is bringing up my anxiety, right? Or their unavailability. Maybe there's something unavailable about them and that makes you anxious. So is this my anxiety or is it their unavailability? And what is it about their unavailability that's bringing up my anxiety? Right? So if you drop the question into your heart, does that mean they're not safe? Maybe, but what does it mean to be safe then? Safe in the sense that they're going to give me what I want, or safe in the sense that it's okay for me to put a lot of emotional investment into this, or it's not okay for me to put a lot of emotional investment into this, right? So just, I don't know the answer. You got to ask yourself those questions and lean into how the answer pops up, right? Um, I might recommend checking out a video on my YouTube channel. Which one should I recommend? I have one called My Personal and Practical Routine for connecting to your intuition. So I'd recommend checking out that video. Let's see. I've been in the fearful avoidant one, the scenario, and his boundaries are pushing me to work on my issues. I would like to get to a point where I don't shut down after an argument, hence being here. Yeah. Well, it sounds like you are on your way. And I might ask Paula, when he holds his boundaries, do you feel like sometimes, well, I guess it depends on what you're defining as a boundary here, right? But when someone's consistent, usually when someone has good boundaries, it means that they're consistent, even if you don't like them, right? The consistency builds trust over time. Well, I can trust that he's consistent in this, right? And sometimes that consistency is what allows that connection ultimately to grow because our feelings are not pushing us around anymore. It's something deeper, like our values, our needs, and our priorities, right? And the feelings are just information about how those are or are not being met. I've never had to deal with these issues before because I just got into a relationship with a good, secure people. So all the above was a non-issue. In this situation now, I realize I had no tools to deal with all these problems because of this. So you're teaching me these tools is wonderful. Now, only if the other person would be willing to be in communication. Yeah, unfortunately, other people we can't control, right? But we can learn how to be in best conversation with ourselves, and sometimes you inspire others to join you there. And I do think that our language matters. The words we use matter. The energy that backs up our words matters. So I do think that there's a level of skill building involved here that does matter, and that's kind of where I like to come in because I really enjoy psychoeducation and being in kind of like a space where we're learning and we're learning skills and we're building skills. So that is fun for me because I think, a lot of times we're not taught this stuff. And it's not like they teach it in school, right? So from the question you answered before, he said to me he wanted a friendship. He doesn't like to be asked personally, so he didn't ask the same, but that was not exactly what happened. He just put defensive and also said, if the other want to, I'm sorry, Sylvia, it's hard to understand your question. I'm not sure what you're asking. Oh, thank you, Bezam. Okay, so Bezam put the link to the video in the chat. Thank you, Bezam. Um, okay, what do we got? So we're almost to the end of our time here. Any other questions popping up? Let's see, what do we have got? Okay, I have one more question. We might go a little over time. They say they love me, but they don't want a relationship. How do I let it go? Okay. So what do you do when someone says that they care very deeply about you and maybe they've even demonstrated that they love you, but they say that they're also not ready, they're not capable, or they're not able to meet you in a relationship? Now, they're not disappearing or cutting you off, but they're also not showing up consistently or fully. And so you're kind of left holding all the feels, wondering if this is as close to love as you're going to get. Now, if you've ever felt stuck between that kind of connection and commitment, between the love that you feel and the absence of a shared direction, then in this segment, I want to talk about how you can let go of that without closing your heart so you can move forward, right, with your own clarity and compassion. But there are a few details to this question that I would like to add that came from our inquirer in our online community. The fearful avoidant in my life doesn't want a relationship, but I think they really love me. It feels like I can't move on because a part of me still believes that it could work if they could only see it. How do I let go when it still feels like love? So I want to identify three core issues in this experience. The first being that, okay, the person demonstrates love, but they're rejecting a relationship as a container for that love. Number two, this inspires you to feel stuck between what is felt and what's possible. But there's also the intention to honor your growth without shutting off your heart, right? So the 3 points I want to make here. Number one, it is possible for someone to love you and not have the capacity for a romantic relationship, right? Sticking it out for less than what you want could signal the presence of a rescuer dynamic in your attachment makeup. And number three, when you enter into a state of inner conflict and confusion, just to stay connected to someone who's conflicted and confused, that's not going to bring either of you clarity, right? So I'm going to break each of these down. So let's look at the first one. It is possible for someone to love you and still not have the capacity to be in a romantic relationship, right? And that is a very painful truth to sit with because we are often taught that love conquers all. But love is a feeling, it is an admiration, it is positive regard, and relationships are made up of both love and tangible exchanges in the material world, which we parcel out based on our needs, values, and priorities. So love is limitless and it can last forever, but your energy, your time, and your resources do not. And so the construction of a harmonious, secure romantic relationship, which is just one, albeit deeply coveted, container for love, it requires readiness, emotional responsibility, and a commitment to growth with compatible and reciprocal exchanges of energy, time, and resources. So someone can genuinely care about you, but still not have the tools to co-create the kind of safety, consistency, and depth of a relationship that you want. It's like they're saying, I love you, but I can't do this. That doesn't mean that you just imagine the connection, but it does mean that you're receiving the limit of what they're able to offer you. And so that's where your self-trust comes in, because just as they are allowed to own their limits, you are allowed to own your needs and walk away with love still in your heart. You don't have to get over the love first. You just have to realize there's enough room to carry it with you and know that it's not meant for a relationship. Now, the second point is if you find yourself sticking around to try to fix it somehow, realize you might have a rescuer dynamic going on, right? So if you're hoping that they'll come around and that your love and loyalty will heal them, it's time to take a moment and ask yourself, am I here because they're ready and we're on the same page, or because I feel responsible for their transformation? And so that is the rescuer dynamic. It's this pattern where we overfunction, overgive, and try to prove our worth by staying despite the fact that we have unmet needs. And that often comes from an inner child wound, right? A part of us that learned that love is scarce and it has to be earned, or that being chosen means that you have to sacrifice something of yourself. And you also learn that you don't have enough love already just as you are. And so when we feel compelled to chase or heal or fix someone in order to get love from them, it's because your inner child doesn't feel like it's getting enough love from you. But trying to rescue someone who does not want to be rescued, it doesn't bring you closer to that love. It's going to bring you closer to burnout. And that subtly teaches the other person, well, I'm just going to do all the emotional labor for you. So you want a relationship where love is freely given and it is safe to receive it, not where you have to prove that you're enough by rescuing them from themselves, right? And not only because that's going to rob them of a chance to grow in really important ways, but also because it's not possible unless they're ready. Okay. So the third thing I want to point out is that entering into a state of inner conflict and confusion just to stay connected to someone who's conflicted and confused is not going to bring either of you clarity. So trying to hold together something that somebody else refuses to claim, it's not going to lead to love. That also is going to exhaust you. Because when you stay entangled with someone who's confused or conflicted and not interested in taking the steps to process or clarify that, then you wind up stepping into that same fog. And you start asking yourself questions like, am I asking too much? Maybe I'm the problem. What if I just gave it a little more time? What more can I do? Right? so on and so forth. You start walking on eggshells. So matching their emotional inconsistency is going to leave you spinning in circles, interpreting, overthinking, decoding, and waiting, right? But the more radical act of love that you can offer yourself is to step out of that confusion, reclaim the clarity of who you are and what you want and what you know, and stop dimming your light just to stay close to someone who is hiding from theirs. Because clarity isn't found by waiting for somebody else to get clear. It is found when you start asking yourself, what do I know? What do I need? And allowing those answers to come through intuitively, leading you back to your own guiding spirit and intuitive self. So I want to wrap this up with a reframe, and I invite you to take this into your body and repeat it with love. Of course they love me because I'm lovable. In fact, I am love. And I will find love wherever I go because I take myself wherever I go. Someone finding me lovable is not a rare thing, but common sense. And I do not owe anyone anything for recognizing that simple truth. I can take pleasure in our exchanges, such as they are, and embrace the lessons of this experience while still holding true to my deepest desires for a lasting, healthy, and expansive connection. Constricting myself to meet someone at the level of their constriction does not serve love in any way. I will be firm in my discernment about what is aligned for me in this lifetime. And that choice empowers me to stay on my path and allow others the opportunity to choose their own path, which is truly, unconditionally loving. So if you have been waiting and hoping and holding space for a love that your partner will not name or claim, this is your permission to let go of that, even if you've still got love in your heart. Not because that connection isn't real, but because you're meant for something else and you're meant for something more. So I hope that that answers that question. And for any of those of you that are here, if you resonate with this reframe, or maybe you found yourself in a similar predicament, you can drop a comment in the chat and let me know. I'd love to know if this is landing with you. And with that, I'll just leave the chat lines open if there are any other final questions, comments before we close for today. Could you talk about the monthly subscription? Will that be a different community of students? Oh, okay. So yes, I actually haven't, I've only sent this out to our students of the Courageous Communicator, but I've received some inquiries for how we could offer more live support and opportunities to connect with other people for practicing the skills we're learning in the Courageous Communicator, and feedback, and also holding the space for some of the other experiential activities we do, like the art experientials and the guided visualizations. And sometimes we do tapping, scripting and tapping for reframing our thoughts, kind of like the reframe that I just offered. So we've been thinking about the possibility of putting together a low-cost membership program, which would be a program that has a curriculum to sort of navigate the journey, but it would be written in such a way that you could join at any time. And we would be doing weekly live calls like this that would each month we'd have a different theme that relates to what is stimulated through our different attachment styles. So for example, let's say one of the themes that comes up a lot is chemistry, right? Relationship chemistry, what goes into that. So in a month, we would break down the different elements of chemistry and how it's informing your relationship, whether it's through the way it's being communicated. So we would have a psychoeducational piece. There would be like a guided visualization piece. We would have an arts-based activity, and then we might have some tapping scripts. And then the fourth week of the month would be either a hot seat experience where a member of someone from the membership would be invited to dive deep, and then the group would be offering their perspective in support of that person. Or we would have like a guest speaker and presenter come in for the membership. So I have not finalized everything. We are writing a curriculum for it just as an offer and a proposal to people who've already taken our courses. And it would be open to people in the Courageous Communicator. It would also be open to other people interested in those ideas and topics. Um, so the lowest membership tier would be under $100. So I don't know exactly what number yet. I got to talk to my spirit guides. But it would be under $100 for a monthly membership, including at least 4 hours of live handholding per month and breakout room activities, connecting to others in the shared space, and so on. That's a good question. What are conversation tools to initiate conversations with a dismissive avoidant person who's easily triggered, always feel kept at a distance? So my course, The Courageous Communicator, really delves deeply into this. If you're not ready to commit to that, we do have a free handout that we have. It's called Repair Script kind of guidebook. And there's different examples in there of how you can use safe and soft strategies in communication with anxious avoidant and fearful avoidant partners. Actually, Bezam, if you could put a link to that in the chat, that would be great. Otherwise, we'll include the link in the replay of this video. Yeah, this can apply to family too, for sure. The recording is available in the student dashboard, also in the private student Facebook group. Yeah, the membership program, I haven't announced it yet. It would be brand new. Anyone that would be joining us would be part what we call a founding member. So there would be special bonuses and dispensations for that. Relate to live Zooms for learning. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Okay, great. So thank you, everyone. I appreciate you showing up live and participating in the group. I really enjoy getting to talk to you and see you here in the space. And in terms of the membership idea, we're going to be sending out more about that in the future. And, it seems like people are interested, so we'll start putting together an offer. And you'll be hearing more about that in the upcoming weeks or months, probably weeks. Thank you, everyone. I hope that you enjoy the rest of your day. See you in the next live stream.